I'm Susanna LaPointe, a 14-year personal training and nutrition coaching veteran. My wellness coaching practice incorporates strength, nutrition, and self-care. Because while fitness and nutrition are very important, they are just the tip of the iceberg as far as taking really amazing care of ourselves goes. Because when it comes to implementing sustainable habits and practices to improve ourselves or our lives, they must be realistic and they must fit into our current lives. Otherwise, they won't stick. And then what even is the point? Join me each week as we explore another aspect of taking amazing care of ourselves through a lens of being super realistic about what we can and will actually. Hey! I'm excited to chat with you guys today because today is going to be part 3 of my series, How the Fuck Should I Eat? And today we're talking about macronutrients. There is a lot of hype around the term, quote, macros, quote, lately. And I want to break down what exactly that means because I'm sure you have heard by now people talking about tracking macros or does this fit into my macros and all that jazz. So I want to break it down today and talk about what it's actually referring to. Because again, they've turned this into some trendy diet situation, which it doesn't need to be. It's seriously just a way of categorizing our nutrients from our food. And it doesn't need to be obsessive like it is. And I just want to talk about kind of like real talk about what macronutrients are and what they do for us. So let's chat about that. So there are micronutrients and there are macronutrients. Micronutrients are the vitamins and minerals found in our food. They are considered micro because we need them in very small amounts and they appear in our food in very small amounts. Vitamins are necessary for energy production, immune function, blood clotting, among other functions. And minerals play an important role in growth, bone health, fluid balance, and fighting disease. It's best to eat a variety of foods so that we get enough vitamins and minerals, or micronutrients. Macronutrients refers to protein, fat, and carbohydrates. Alcohol is also considered a macronutrient, but because it's not essential, obviously, I'm not going to be including it into today's discussion. But I just want you to know that it is considered a macronutrient. We need these macronutrients, protein, carbohydrates, and fat, in larger amounts, as these make up all of the calories we consume to keep us alive and healthy and vital. By this point, I'm sure you've all heard the term tracking macros. This is a new diet trend that basically refers to logging your food and tracking your calories and categorizing these calories into specific amounts of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Shooting for specific percentages of each one, for example, aiming for 30% protein, 30% fat, and 40% carbohydrates, can help people make sure they are getting enough of each. Honestly, in my opinion, the only reason for tracking macros is to make sure we are getting adequate protein. If we are consuming an appropriate amount of calories and within that amount of calories, an appropriate amount of protein, we usually end up in a good place, blood sugar stability wise and satisfaction wise. And ensuring that we get enough protein, making that a focus, can aid in fat loss. In my experience, when left to our own devices without a basic knowledge of nutrition or an awareness of how much protein we need, most people don't get enough to thrive. Yes, we get enough to survive, but in order to feel lean, healthy, vital, and in control of our food sugar, or in control of our food choices with stable blood sugar, if we are not intentionally making protein a priority, we are usually not getting enough for optimal health. Okay. You may or may not know this, but it's actually relatively interesting that protein and carbohydrates both have 4 calories per gram, and then fat has 9 calories per gram. So here's a quick example of how this would make sense. So if a chicken breast has 22 grams of protein, which is pretty typical for a typical chicken breast, that adds up to about 88 calories. This is considered a lean protein. Chicken breast is very low fat with only 2 to 3 grams of fat, which adds up to about 18 to 27 calories, and no carbohydrates. So a chicken breast is a low-fat, low-calorie way to get 22 grams of protein, and it's about 115 calories total with those extra kind of 2 grams of fat in there. A chicken thigh, however, which is not considered a lean protein, has about 17 grams of protein, but also about 10 grams of fat. So that makes it about 158 calories. It's not a huge difference, but you can see how that extra amount would add up because fat grams have so many more calories than protein grams. Okay, that was just a little example of how protein and fat have different calorie amounts. And I want to break down each macronutrient and give some examples of each and explain what each one does in our bodies. All the macronutrients, including carbohydrates, are essential. They are all important. Carbs are not bad. We shouldn't be cutting out entire groups of macronutrients because one of them gets a bad rap. But let me try to... Okay, I'm going to start with protein. Protein provides the building blocks for our muscles and tissues. Its job is to build and repair tissues and protect lean body mass, which is our muscle. Which, side note, is our most precious commodity on our body. We should be doing everything we can to keep the muscle that we have and be constantly working to build more and making sure we are getting adequate protein to do this. Protein is broken down into amino acids, which are the building blocks of the protein. There are 2 types of amino acids: essential, which we need to get from our diet. They're essential, meaning we need to get them. We need to supply them to our diet. And non-essential, which our body just goes ahead and makes for us. So we don't have to worry about those as much because our body just does it for us. Protein-rich foods include meat, fish, eggs, dairy products, and also beans, nuts, and seeds. Plus, all the other foods, like all vegetables, grains, legumes, they all have some, a small amount of protein in them, but these are the heaviest hitting sources of protein. You do not need to eat animal foods to get enough protein. But if you consume mostly plant-based foods, you need to be extra mindful to get in enough protein. Things like lentils, beans, and seeds have protein, but not as much per serving as meat. So it does require that you have a little bit of a working knowledge of protein and you are intentionally getting enough each time you have a meal. Protein on its own does not supply any energy, but it does provide satisfaction and satiation, which is the feeling of fullness. And it's very important to eat adequate protein so that we are not over-consuming other calories. Because if we are left to our own devices, most of us will choose carbohydrates and fats instead of protein-rich foods. It's just kind of a preferential thing. If we're left to our own devices, we're generally not looking for. Okay, on to carbohydrates. Poor, misunderstood carbohydrates. This macronutrient has gotten such a bad rap lately with all of the low carb and keto diets that are so trendy right now. The truth is that carbohydrates are essential for us to actually have the energy to do daily activities that make up our lives. Here's the deal. Both kale and sugar are considered carbohydrates. So there's a little distinction here when people say to avoid carbs or carbs are bad or whatever. Yes, sugar and processed carbohydrates that quickly convert to sugar are not the healthiest things to consume, but kale and all other vegetables and fruits are considered carbohydrates and are necessary sources for all those vitamins and minerals I mentioned earlier. And also fiber, which is extremely important. All carbohydrates are eventually broken down into glucose, which is the main source of energy for your body. Besides being our main energy source, carbs help synthesize specific amino acids from protein and allow for consistent bowel movements by way of fiber, which is extremely important when pursuing optimal health. Fiber is a type of carbohydrate that can't be broken down in our digestive tracts, so it doesn't give us any energy, but it does help us remove our waste and gives our intestinal tract the healthy kind of scrubbing that it needs to. Carbohydrates are broken into two categories: simple carbs and complex carbs. Simple carbs are generally what people are referring to when they make a blanket statement like carbs are bad. Simple carbohydrates are generally processed, or they maybe always are processed, and include flour, sugar in all its iterations, and anything else that's been taken from its natural state and been finely ground down to a powder or turned into a syrup, like corn syrup, allowing it to quickly enter our bloodstream and spike our blood sugar immediately. Complex carbohydrates, on the other hand, are super necessary. These include all vegetables, from kale to potatoes, all fruits, all whole grains, from rice to quinoa to spelt, all beans, legumes, and other beans and legumes, and lentils. All of these things are necessary to ensure we are getting enough fiber. The recommended daily amount of fiber is 25 grams for women and 35 grams for men. And these numbers are actually extremely low. When shooting for optimal health, the number we should be shooting for is actually around 50 to 60 grams. This would require us to be eating a lot of vegetables, a lot of legumes, and fibrous grains. And here is the kicker. Most people, before being educated about fiber and beneficial carbohydrates and all of these things, are generally getting between 5 and 15 grams of fiber per day. I have a lot of my clients track their nutrition for a short while when I first start working with them to get a snapshot of what they're consuming. And in order to make some improvements, we just kind of take a look at what's happening now and just kind of figure out where to make some adjustments, small adjustments, realistic adjustments, of course. And what I consistently find is that their diets, again, left to your own devices before you are educated on this stuff, super low in fiber. No wonder so many people have digestive issues, because we are told that carbs are bad. So that means that we eat more meat and cheese and dairy, which are high in protein and fat. And they actually kind of do the opposite of what fiber does when it comes to our digestive tract. They kind of stop things up. So a lot of people that I work with have digestive issues, like a lot of people. And it's generally because they're not consuming enough fiber, which is actually a pretty easy fix once you, again, become educated. But if you don't know, then you don't know. And things just kind of aren't moving through very well. Okay, on to fats. It's kind of funny how fats have been kind of let off the hook recently in light of villainizing carbs, which is just so ridiculous. It's just the diet culture and the consistent need for something new and novel, and it's just freaking crazy. High-fat diets like keto have put fats back in the spotlight now, and basically the claim is that you can eat all the fat you want, which is not true. Not true. Fats allow us to store energy. It cushions organs, it makes certain hormones, and absorbs fat-soluble vitamins. And it also helps with our cell membranes integrity. There are good fats and bad fats. The good fats are ones that are intact in their whole food form. Like, these are the best fats. Avocados, nuts, coconut, and seeds. There's not actually a ton of sources of intact fats. So they come basically from avocados and nuts and seeds. The bad fats, or trans fats, are fats that have been transformed, which I called trans fats. They're transformed from their natural state into a more shelf-stable fat in the form of shortening, margarine, baked goods, and fried foods. These fats should be avoided. A more neutral form of fat are oils, and only a few of them are actually recommended for optimal health. Oils are a highly concentrated source of calories, coming in at 120 calories per tablespoon, as opposed to that entire chicken breast I mentioned earlier, which is 120 calories also. Just fats are just much more concentrated sources of energy. So it's very easy to overeat fats, like very easy. Extra virgin olive oil is good for salad dressings and low and medium heat cooking. And then avocado oil has a higher smoke point, meaning it doesn't degrade as easily in high heat. So you can do some higher heat cooking with it. And then coconut oil, in moderation, of course, is great for baking, I think. Other oils like canola, safflower, and soybean oil are high in inflammatory fats and are generally used in large quantities because they are cheap to extract, and they are generally in foods like salad dressings, which in my opinion should be avoided most of the time. Not that you should avoid salad dressings, but you should avoid salad dressings made with these oils. Check the labels at the grocery store and you will see that soybean or canola oil are always in salad dressings. These oils are inflammatory. So in extreme moderation, once in a while, if you're at a restaurant and you get a salad and it has a dressing, like that's totally fine. But you're better off making your own or purchasing Primal Kitchen salad dressings that are made with avocado oil. They're just a lot better for you. They have the omega-3 fats instead of the omega-6 inflammatory fats. Okay, so there is a basic overview of the 3 macronutrients, their functions in our body, and why each one is an important part of our diet. Now comes the work of intentionally balancing our meals with the right amounts of each. My very general advice is to track your food consumption over a few days in an app like MyFitnessPal. I like that one the best. And just see where you are currently landing. I generally recommend shooting for 100 grams of protein per day, which translates to about 20 to 30 grams per meal. Most people left to their own devices are not getting anywhere close to that. And it actually is fairly challenging for most people to get to 100 grams. And I don't want you to always hit 100 grams. But if you're shooting for that, you're definitely going to get more than if you are, again, left to your own devices and with kind of an uneducated view of food. Most of us are not getting enough protein. And then aiming for at least 25 grams or higher of fiber. Paying attention to just those 2 things could make a world of difference in your satiety and satisfaction levels and would probably ensure that you're not having wild blood sugar swings that cause unstable energy and unstable moods. Paying attention to just these 2 things would lessen cravings for sugary foods, and paying attention to just these 2 things could help you stabilize or even lose weight and give you so much more energy. So again, kind of shooting for 100 grams of protein and at least. In my experience, if you are consuming an appropriate number of calories for your age, gender, and activity level, plus getting enough protein, again, shooting for 100 grams a day, and enough fiber, some people prefer more fat in their diet in the form of cheese, charcuterie, nuts, olives, dairy products, richer foods. And some people prefer more carbohydrates, like brown rice, sweet potatoes, and beans. This is me. This is what makes me feel satisfied, is a larger amount of low-fat carbohydrates. And again, people are just different. Some people prefer more fat and some people prefer more carbohydrates. I don't think that for most people, obsessing over the fat and carbohydrate numbers is beneficial. I think it's really good to have a good picture of how many calories are appropriate for you by way of tracking your nutrition for a few days or a couple weeks, but obsessing over fitting your foods into macronutrient percentages, as is so popular these days, is just another way of letting someone else tell us what the right way of eating is for us. And this is why so many people have become victims of the diet industry, bouncing from one diet to the next with no real knowledge of nutrition and how they feel best eating. So I encourage you to experiment for yourself within some parameters, like the kind of shooting for 100 grams of protein and 25 grams or more of fiber to start, to find what satisfies you and gets you the results you want. Stable energy, stable mood, a positive outlook, and a healthy weight are all the results of having a balanced diet and having stable blood sugar, which is so important. Okay, that's it for me today. Thank you again so much for joining me. And as always, if you have any comments or questions, please reach out to me at any of the links in the show notes. I love helping my clients make breakthrough with their nutrition, and I would love to help you. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode today, and I will chat with you all next week. Bye!